Welcome to the Common Man Football Show. My name is James Cobern, and today's episode, we're doing Todd Gurley versus David Johnson.
There can be only one.
And this was another question submitted in the comments. Can you do a Todd Gurley versus David Johnson video? Analytics battle, and yes, I can do a Todd Gurley versus David Johnson analytics battle. I figured, you know what, this is a good, it's kind of recent, but there's been a lot of, maybe not backlash, but there's been a lot of question marks about the 2015 running back class, specifically because of what's happened, obviously. Todd Gurley people were so certain that Todd Gurley was the top back from that class, and then David Johnson goes out and has the best season of any running back in the 2016 season based on his market share production. So you're starting to see people kind of retract their thoughts on Todd Gurley, especially since his yards per carry dipped into that 3 yardage area, basically below 4 yards per carry kind of area is where Todd Gurley ended up. And there's lots of questions in terms of how good is he? Was he a fluke? Is he the next Trent Richardson? Lots of stuff like that. I think some of that stuff is a little overboard, But I think the bottom line is I figure, this is a good analytics battle. This is a good way to kind of showcase the similarities and the differences between both these prospects and ultimately come to a conclusion about who is better. Now, how are we going to do that? Well, with analytics. And the main analytics we're going to be using today is in terms of market share production. Market share production is where you take the total offensive yardage of a running back and you divide it by the team total yardage. So, for example, if a running back has, say, 1,000 yards in a 4,000 yard offense, then that running back had 25% market share, total offensive market share production. You take that number, you compare it to every single running back's performance. You basically do every single running back in terms of their market share production, and you compare it to every one of those guys. Look at where the All-Pro guys fell, look at where the Pro Bowl guys fell, and then you're able to kind of create a way of comparing and contrasting what the past pros did and what how all that kind of stuff works. So that's what we're doing. We're doing that. We're also doing athleticism, specifically explosive lower body strength score, speed score, and flexibility score. Explosive lower body strength is the vertical and broad jump measured against mass density. The speed score is the 40-yard dash measured against mass density. And then the flexibility score is the short shell / free cone measured against mass density, which of course is weight divided by height. And with all that out of the way, let's get to Todd Gurley, into what he looked like in terms of college, what he looks like in terms of his athleticism coming out of college, which, don't tell anybody, but it's kind of like secret information. And then, of course, what his production has been at the NFL level. So starting out with Todd Gurley's production, he had a 90.76 total offensive market share production score at Georgia. Based on that production, he pretty much hit the all-pro threshold, Pro Bowl threshold, 5-time Pro Bowl threshold, and 3-time Pro Bowl threshold. His production hit everything out of the mark. I mean, there's no way around it. He was a very, very productive player at Georgia. When you look at his athleticism, now, the main thing I want to add a caveat to this is that this is athleticism that was leaked to me from a scout, NFL scout, who works for an NFL team, and this is the athleticism stuff that they basically gave me this data. There's no way of proving that this data is correct. There's no way of, because again, he didn't go to the combine. He worked out individually for NFL teams. So this is basically what the rumors have been about his athleticism. And you can take this as gospel and say it's true or not. Like, I'm leaving that up to you, because I am as much a confirmation, like I need confirmation as much as anybody. I prefer combine numbers to every other number. You know, if you put a gun to my head, I'm going to go with the combine numbers versus some anonymous scouts numbers. But the fact that Todd Gurley doesn't really have any combine numbers or pro day numbers because he was pretty much refusing to do that during the process because he was recovering from injury, I figured, you know what, I'll just go with what I was told from someone who actually worked for an NFL team and what they got for his numbers. And based on that scout, from the numbers that he gave me on Todd Gurley had an 81.04 explosive lower body strength score, a 75.65 speed score for his size, and a 96.56 flexibility score for his size. Based on my data, Todd Gurley hits at least one athleticism score of 79 or higher in terms of his explosiveness and his flexibility. Both those marks hit at least the All-Pro/Pro Bowl level for a running back of his size, and in many ways that's why teams took him as high as he went, is because they worked him out privately, and he pretty much hit all the marks that they wanted him to hit, essentially. So, and again, this could be all wrong. NFL teams, the one thing I could say about most NFL teams leaking data is it's usually too good to be true, artificially inflated. A lot of times they really like a player, so they want to put them in the best light possible to their, bosses, essentially. So there's no doubt in my mind that Todd Gurley may be less athletic than this, because this is purely from a team that really liked him and wanted him, so obviously they're going to report the better numbers for him. So just keep that in mind. But some of this just does make sense. I mean, I think it's pretty clear that he had at least All-Pro/Pro Bowl athleticism coming out. Again, you could dismiss all this if you want, but that's just how I feel like the numbers are close. Even if these numbers are off by a decent amount, he would still hit at least the All-Pro/Pro Bowl threshold for flexibility for his size. So that's all I would say about Todd Gurley when it comes to that. When it comes to his actual NFL production, he's been very good. Despite the fact that his yards per carry dropped from 2015 to 2016, his actual market share production has not dropped. Both in 2015 and 2016, he had a 93 or higher market share production score in both those seasons. So he pretty much put up the identical amount of production in both those seasons. It's just one year he was on an offense that was pretty okay, and then the next year he was on an offense that was just terrible overall. So his production hasn't really dropped in terms of impact on the team of the Rams. It's just that the offense around him got worse. He still was contributing as much as he was contributing before. It's just the offense around him got worse. So that's really all it comes down to with Todd Gurley in terms of his NFL production. But let's see how David Johnson has done in terms of what he looked like coming out of college, and of course what his NFL production looks like, and of course athleticism. So when it comes to David Johnson's production, he had a 92.82 market share production score. The only thing I could say about this is that this is definitely better than Todd Gurley, but David Johnson did this at Northern Iowa, while Todd Gurley did his production in the SEC. I'm not taking away anything that David Johnson did. It's just that, and I actually want to do a video on FCS production versus FBS production in terms of the differences in quality and outcomes and stuff like that. But the bottom line is David Johnson had very, very good production in Northern Iowa. It hit at least the threshold for multiple All-Pro players, even though it was at the FCS level, which, based on the data, would actually kind of limit his overall upside a bit from his production. Basically meaning that it's less likely that he'll become a multiple All-Pro guy because he came from the FCS. That's a totally different discussion. But based on his athleticism, very good overall. Had a 97.28 explosive lower body strength score, had a 78.56 speed score, and an 88.92 flexibility score. All those marks are really, really good. So good, in fact, that they compare very favorably to Steven Jackson in terms of his athleticism. This is actually David Johnson versus Steven Jackson. And as you can see, David Johnson is essentially like a more explosive version of Steven Jackson based on his athleticism profile. So that is very good as well. And when you actually look at David Johnson's production, in 2015, he did not have as much of an impact as Todd Gurley in his first year. He only had a 79.47 market share production year in 2015, but in 2016 he had a 98.68 market share production score, which was the highest amongst every single running back in the 2016 season. So David Johnson essentially has had the higher peak of his career, if you will, if that makes any sense. Like, basically, Todd Gurley's never had a 98.68 market share production score season ever yet. He's been in the 90s, but he hasn't hit 98.68 out of 100. So the bottom line is David Johnson has pretty much, if you compare David Johnson's athleticism to Todd Gurley, David Johnson is just a much better athlete. His production, he didn't really have the rookie season that Todd Gurley had, but he definitely had a very, very high-end season in 2016. So there's a lot of things, like both of these running backs are good. I don't even know why I'm doing this battle. But, I mean, the bottom line is David Johnson has a very good profile overall in terms of his production, his athleticism, and of course, what he's done in the NFL level so far this year. So ultimately, who wins this analytics battle of wills, if you will? And this is actually going to be the first time I'm going to say it's a tie. And I know ties are like kissing your sister, and nobody likes a tie. And come on, James, but honestly, you know what? Leave a comment below on who you think wins this battle, because as far as I'm concerned, both these guys are great running backs. Both of them. Period. Todd Gurley, both NFL seasons, put up 90 percentile or higher production, which is really great for any young running back. I know that the team around him got worse in 2016, but he still put up personally the same amount of impact from his rookie season to his second year. Like, there was no dip in terms of that. It was just a dip in terms of the quality of team that was around him. Both these guys had production in college that was so similar. You know, like, it's statistically a wash between these two, because even though David Johnson technically has higher production, again, that production was against Northern Iowa, you know, FCS level production mostly. You know, he did play some FBS teams, but not every single team on his schedule was an FBS team. So that kind of, like, if you actually add that factor into it in terms of the competition he faced, that makes Todd Gurley look a little bit better in terms of his production. But at the same time, when you come to athleticism, David Johnson is much better than Todd Gurley, because even based on the numbers that were leaked, at least the numbers that could be true, could not be true about Todd Gurley, even based on that, David Johnson still came out with much better overall athleticism, you know, much more explosive, faster, stuff like that. So I'm calling it a tie. You may not want to do that, and also the fact that David Johnson, even though he did have the best season ever as a running back, at least in 2016, he had the best season out of every running back in 2016 with a 98.68 overall production score. He didn't do that in his rookie year. You know, Todd Gurley had a better rookie year than David Johnson did as a rookie. So in terms of total impact. So even though David Johnson had a great 2016 season, I don't think that David Johnson having one season where he was so great makes him the guy that, yeah, he's going to be the guy who's going to have the best career ever going forward, because he had a really great season this year on a team that didn't crumble as much as the Rams did. You know, like, if you put David Johnson on the Rams, who knows what would happen because of how bad the Rams were as an offense overall. So honestly, I'm calling it a tie. But again, let me know, who do you think should win this analytics battle? I mean, analytics is not so cut and dry. Like, I really don't know what else to say because these guys are so similar. They had identical amounts of production at the college level. They had almost identical amounts of athleticism. You know, both these guys are high-end athletes. You know, now, of course, Todd Gurley stuff, you could debate whether you believe in those numbers or not, but even if they were off by a bit, he still was a above-average athlete overall based on his numbers, even if you adjust for potential issues with that data. So both these guys are great athletes. They're guys who had great production in college, and they're guys that so far in their NFL careers have put up 90 percentile running back production, which is pretty much top 10 production at least once in their career. At least in David Johnson's case, he was number one year. So I'm calling it a tie, guys. That's me. I mean, as an analytics guy, I just think that these guys, in terms of what their futures will look like, I think they'll be pretty similar. You know, they have very similar marks, and it's tough to really pick one over the other. So I'm going to go with a tie on this one. So again, my name is James Cobern. You can find my work at draftcoburn.wordpress.com, and you can also follow me on Twitter at Geometrics. And if you like this content and you want more content like this, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Share this video as well with anybody that you know, and I will talk to you guys in the next video. Peace. And again, by the way, let me know, who do you think wins out over the long term? Do you go with the fact that Todd Gurley had really great production against the SEC while David Johnson did not, and the fact that Todd Gurley is younger than David Johnson? Or do you go with the fact that David Johnson has so far, you know, he's more athletic than him, and of course he had a season in 2016 where he had the top running back season out of everybody, you know, including Todd Gurley. So he's obviously the guy that's going to, you know, continue to be great going forward. So again, let me know in the comments down below, and I'll talk to you guys in the next video. Again, peace.